I'm not sure how many of us out there understand what the word CRISPR actually means. So perhaps we should start off by defining that. Reese, do you want to go with that first?
Sure. Where CRISPR comes from, it's the memory and immune systems from bacteria, from microbes, of how they recognize an infection from something and cut it up, basically. And so CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly interspaced palindromic repeats, which is not useful to remember. But it's a way of reading the DNA, finding, recognizing something that might be virus code that's been inserted or is free floating, cutting it or sticking it somewhere else, and it is the immune system from microbes. And so it's been used to read the DNA in mammals and plants and other creatures, find a piece of DNA that you want to cut to insert maybe a change or a new segment. So you can change a gene that does one thing into a gene that does something else, or repair code that is wrong. And so the question that we were talking about in the hallway is, well, what is the blockchain equivalent of this? And
because there's a malignant element here that that we're exploiting when we're doing it in medicine and in genetics. So is there an equivalent of this on the blockchain? And who would be exploiting it, do you think?
Yeah, and so it's probably not been invented yet for blockchain. And we were talking at breakfast about whether a quantum computer decrypting the code of the hashes in a blockchain would be something that could scan the blockchain like CRISPR, find the transaction that you want to change, decrypt it, make the change, re-encrypt it, which is computationally not possible now, but maybe with more powerful computers. And a crypto expert who was at breakfast, who will be on a panel later, said, well, that's possible maybe in 20 years. And so we'll hear more about that later.
Yeah, I mean, we thought it was probably about 20 years away, but, and that was on an optimistic, on the optimistic side. But
yeah,
okay.
So, but about 20 years. One of my friends came to my kitchen. I often gather 50 friends at my kitchen and said, oh, today I just kind of cut a head of my client and put it into fridge to store it for 100 years until people invent a way to cure kind of illness and to put this head into a new body. So it's cryonica. So my friend just have a side business. It's not his primary, to freeze people for 100 years. He's not sure that this freezing is not damaging brain, because this technology is not well tested. However, for people who do not have other way other than just try this or die immediately, they provide a good client flow for him. I actually will buy a discounted ticket for this service for entire body. So if you remember me, you will unfreeze or decide to forget. We'll see. So I feel you want to add. Huh?
Sure. Here's the thing. Really, what we're trying to do here is link the blockchain to something else, which is human patterns of memory, human patterns of thinking, and human patterns of DNA. So that's where the CRISPR comes in. That's the DNA. That's where what he mentioned, how we become immortal, comes in. That's actually the human mind, the human memory, the way we think. We are all just patterns, really, and patterns are just data. The thing that blockchain does really well is maintain the veracity of the data, maintain the ownership of the data. The blockchain itself is non-repudiable, which means that you know exactly who owns what, and the blockchain itself as a technology that allows data to also own data. That is basically where I see blockchain in immortality, in actually helping us achieve that, not just technology, but that framework of creating immortal humans. And that's what I think is the end goal for all of us, humanity, is to, for me, even avoid death if possible.
Yeah, and what is interesting, that one of the user cases for blockchain and your projects is to store information about data connected DNA of a person with his medical records. So this is used, there are millions of persons, and this is used to find correlation and find which letter of DNA is responsible for a certain type of illness or a human kind of characteristic, such as brain size or muscles or color.
Or skin care or anything else. But the issue becomes, what do you do once you find what those genetic coding is for your brain size, skin color, etc.? You know, are we in a position to try to change them? Is that what we're trying to do? You know, part of Reese's comments earlier on was that in biology, at least, we have the idea of diversity and Darwinian natural selection. So where does that, what does that mean for the blockchain in particular? You know, is that going to be a question of, for example, usage of electricity? Is it security? Is it the amount of capital? Are those the energy, or are those the kind of things that are going to force the natural selection of blockchain?
Yeah.
Which one would you say be the most pressing factor? Because, you know, obviously, apart from a solar flare or a major crackdown on the energy exchange, energy may not be the one. Is it the amount of capital? I mean, we've seen the amount of capital going into blockchain has been enormous.
Well, something that would be catastrophic for blockchain in general is if somebody were to break the cryptography technique, in that where people would lose faith or lose trust in its ability to process the truth. And so that hasn't happened in 10 years, and the architecture is mathematically sound and doesn't look like it's likely to happen. But there are many what they call zero-day discoveries from hackers that figure out ways to get around architecture that is seemingly sound, like recently happened with the Intel chip designs.
Right.
And so that's not likely to happen to blockchain, but it could. And one of the protections for that is to have many different flavors of blockchain. And so that maybe happens to one flavor, but not all the flavors. So that's where diversity becomes very important in terms of the security and stability of the whole system.
With that analogy, though, the quantum computer would cause a mass extinction event for most of the blockchains, like even the quantum proof ones. Like, we don't have quantum computers yet, so we don't really know if they are. Like, it's not been tested in the field yet. I feel that in terms of this discussion, the intersection between what we call CRISPR, Cas9, and quantum computing is really strong, because the way we can edit the blockchain, the way we can change what the blockchain, what your blockchain stands for, means that, in effect, we can get your tokens, we can get your money. So that's what I think about it, basically.
And you mentioned mass extinctions, and one of an example of mass extinction is when the asteroid hit that killed everything that was big or couldn't hide under a rock or didn't have fur or didn't have feathers. So it killed all the dinosaurs, for example, and only what were sort of the rodent and chicken equivalents survived. And so
you mean the mammals?
Well, birds.
Chickens, that's true. I'd forgotten.
Which are
Dinosaurs.
direct descendants of the dinosaurs. But but that was a mass extinction that affected certain characteristics of things, of if they were large, if they couldn't warm themselves, and so maybe 90% of the species that existed at that time were wiped out, but 10% did survive. But the ones that did survive were pretty different than the ones that went extinct. And so that could happen to software, it could happen to blockchains, it could happen to computers, it could happen to a lot of things that we rely on, like GPS, everything that relies on GPS could be wiped out with one solar flare. And so that kind of thing could happen. And so a little bit of a backup plan needs to be in place for if it does.
Yeah. So it looks like we have an option to be freezed and wait when either, I mean, if you are going to die, which is not a good thing because you are have so many great ideas. It's great if you live longer, of course. It looks like just two options. First is to wait until there will be CRISPR, which can kind of make us live longer, which is edit this program in DNA, which kill us.
Yes.
Yes. So you can go to my friends, to his fridge, and the second option is also to get into fridge and wait when somebody will be able to upload you into blockchain. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot. It's a very kind of new dimension. I think there could be somebody who have also insights to share. Who wants to kind of give his view on biotech? Yes. Oh. Okay.
I missed a bit of the talk, but I presume I did hear a little bit of quantum computing and using that to break blockchains or public-private keys. This is closer than a lot of people think. This is a field of mine, and it's closer than we all think, and there's various other things like Mirai botnets and IoT that give us distributed power to potentially hack the encryption techniques currently on blockchain, or certainly asymmetric encryption. In terms of quantum computing, may I ask from the people on the stage if this is an area that you have experience in, where you see now we're currently deploying lots of applications on the blockchain, and then in 5-6 years' time, it can all be stolen or all our private keys are gone. What solutions are there within your kind of field of study or experience that we can start having, essentially quantum-resistant ledgers?
Well, there's two protections that are pretty simple. One is Bitcoin's blockchain does consume a lot of energy, which means even if you could change a record in it, you would have to have enough computing power using enough electricity to reconstruct the entire blockchain from scratch, which the fact that it uses a lot of energy to do that is a protection by itself, and that few people have that much electricity or that much compute power to do it, and those that do tend to not want to be breaking the system. And then the other factor that's built in is that it's a distributed, decentralized system, so the same record is held on thousands of mining nodes or thousands of compute centers. And so even if you were to be able to break it and construct a fake blockchain on your local compute center, you would also have to get it propagated onto many thousands, or majority, more than half of other mining nodes. And so those two things, the amount of energy and the distributed nature of it, means that even if you could break the cryptography, you have another couple hurdles to get over to be able to actually compromise the overall system.
He needs a mic. He needs a mic.
Right, and so that's the point of saying have some extra secure systems and some more anonymous systems and some differently distributed systems and some different methods of encrypting and you know, different proofs of state, whether instead of proof of work, you change to proof of space and time, or proof of, you know, ownership. So if you have several different systems, maybe one of them gets hacked, but the others survive. So it's like one
next,
species
please.
going extinct.
Yep.
Do you think there is Satoshi Nakamoto to life who could actually edit our DNAs to make us live forever?
Well,
Is there Satoshi Nakamoto for biotech who invented editing to live forever, right?
Yeah, so the key is
We should ask
what is the realistic option to get us living forever now that we are living only for
so
decades? Yeah.
Understand. In the life extension community, there's sort of two genres of thinking. There's the meatheads and the gearheads. And the meatheads is, how do I have my biological self live forever, either by freezing me or fixing what's wrong with me as I wear out, and reprogramming the code in me that says, you know, puberty now, menopause now, death now. That's pre-programmed, and it's different for different species, so it's obviously programmed. And the gearheads is, how do I transfer me, or my consciousness and my essence, into the internet? So the gearheads or meatheads, and some people want to do both and say, keep a biological copy of me going and an electronic copy of me going. And usually their backup plan is to freeze yourself in case we don't figure it out in time. And there's already like a good example of that, Otzi the Iceman, who fell in a glacier 5,000 years ago and was frozen, and they recently found him and thawed him out, and he hasn't come back to life, but they're learning a lot of things about him, so he's partly back to life.
I don't think they were quite thinking of coming back to life as a frozen mummy being exhibited. But don't we have a life that exists even now at the moment in the internet? I mean, you know, stuff that you store on your Facebook, etc., is going to be there forever. So in some sense, the essence of us, or the life we have led, the thoughts we have had, are pretty much there in perpetuity to a large extent anyway.
Absolutely. That most of us have electronic personas. Many have many. And for example, your Facebook profile, and you put your opinions and your images and your voice in some cases and videos, and more and more of your essence is on the internet. And this version of you, the electronic version of you, will outlast the biological version of you. And if you transfer in your daily life more and more of yourself onto the internet, it'll be easier for the internet to construct a more complete version of you with your own personality and your own decision making. And at some stage, you can give the electronic version of you a credit card and set it free in the internet and to go out and prosper. Where the biological version of you is still there, and the digital version is free out in the world, and will likely outlast the biological version of you. And beyond the scope of this panel discussion, like where your consciousness is between those two, that's a different, more detailed discussion.